Thank you very much. It's a real honor to be here from my long-term mentor, Jack, and Michael, who gave me a lot of great input as an early reader of the book, and also Matt Sheehan, who's my collaborator on the book. So today, I'm going to tell you about AI, but many of you have not met me before, so I want a more familiar face who's more authoritative to tell you what AI is going to do.
To build a better world with artificial intelligence.
And listen to this.
人工智能正在改变世界。
So that was not the President Trump talking. That was iFlyTech's AI synthesis of President Trump in English and Chinese. And that should give you an idea how powerful the technology is already. And since this is not a tech talk, I'm just going to take 1 minute and explain what is AI and what is deep learning. AI is the study of how to make machines think like us. And after many years of work, we've made one huge discovery that's called deep learning. And what deep learning does is that's that little gray network in the middle that you feed a lot of things into, and then it makes a certain determination. What it can do today is within a single domain with large amounts of training data, it can make very accurate decisions, predictions, classifications, and as you heard, synthesis, but only in one domain. And that is its Achilles heel. And that's why you don't have to worry about us being ruled by cyborgs, because we humans can think broadly and can think strategically, can think creatively, can think cross-domain, and we have common sense. And AI doesn't have any of that. It is basically a pattern recognizer that takes correlations in huge amounts of data and makes very, very accurate decisions within just one domain. For example, how to play Go, whether to give someone a loan, how to recognize a face, and how to synthesize speech. So it does only one thing, and they don't mix. That's not entirely 100% perfectly accurate description, but that's good enough for the rest of the talk for you to see the opportunities and the limitations of AI. In terms of applications of AI, and we have very many, that single discovery called deep learning is able to be used in many different areas. And the most popular area today is internet AI. That is applying deep learning or related technologies to internet. And what does that mean? It means for Google to know which ads to serve to you, for Amazon to know what products you might buy with that other product. You might have noticed these companies have become better and better at getting us to buy things. At Facebook, in deciding what to put on the news feed that will increase the number of minutes that you continue to stay in the app. So these are the capabilities of AI, and then they directly link to the profitability of the company. The more minutes you're on Facebook, the more things you buy on Google and Amazon, the more money they make. And imagine you have a black box which can be tuned to maximize the money you make. That's essentially what these companies have. And that's why these three companies, along with Microsoft and China's Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent, have the world's best AI talents, is because each AI talent that joins them, even though it may cost them $1 million to hire the talent per year, that person may make them 10 or 20 or $100 million in that kind of scalable business. And every day we are lab rats to these internet companies. We are labeling their data for them. Every time you click on anything, you're giving a strong hint to Amazon that you're buying or not buying, to Google that you're happy or not happy with the search results. And that's used to fuel its ability to not only better serve you ads, but also serve other people like you. So that's why internet AI has created many close to $1 trillion companies. And these are, if you look at the top 20 most valuable companies in the world, several of them are made in that category because of the large reach data and the ability to use AI to maximize money on the data. And that's why it's the first wave in these, the use of AI. So who else has large amounts of data? Businesses. So businesses like banks, insurance companies, hospitals are all examples that can use data. Governments, for example, a bank could use its large amount of data that used to be stored for archive reasons. Many banks and insurance companies that I've met view their data storage group as a cost center because all they do is buy up these machines and storage and store all this data, and that's because of legal and customer requirements. But in the age of AI, all that archival data becomes a goldmine because a bank can do lots of things with it. For example, a bank that uses a system, let's say from our portfolio company, Fourth Paradigm, that sells for AI for banking, they can construct a customer profile just based on that customer's past spending and all customers' past behavior so as to predict what kind of product the customer might buy so that they'll push more products to the people who might buy them, or determine if a use of a credit card is legitimate or possibly fraudulent, or whether that person would repay a loan of varying sizes, or how to compose a better asset allocation for the risk tolerance of that user. No longer do you have to fill out all that KYC information about your risk tolerance. Those of you who filled it out really don't understand exactly what's meant, but the banks can look at all the data that you've done and know what kind of investor you have. So KYC is merely for legal compliance, but the bank can really tailor investment much better for you. So that's just an example in banks. You can extrapolate to insurance companies, hospitals, and so on and so forth. So that is business AI, companies that have large inventories of data and accumulating more data and turn that into intelligence and revenue and profit. The third wave is when the AI starts to gain the ability to see and hear. So suddenly your AI has vision and speech. And generally, speech and image data are transient, right? Like this speech, if it weren't recorded, it would be gone. What's left is what's in your memory. But now we can actually capture the speech and the video and do things with it. So what things can you do? Well, you can do face recognition, speech recognition. You've heard about Amazon Echo and Amazon Go, right? An autonomous store. So once you put cameras and sensors in a location, you can capture all that's going on in it and use it to build applications that didn't exist before. And that can be tremendously useful. I'll give you an example. Ant Financial is a company in China that you know, they basically do payments. So the large amounts of data they have can be used to, as a phased wave 2, to minimize fraudulent use because they have so much data from mobile payment. Mobile payment in China is 50 times larger than US, so all that data can be used to minimize fraudulent use. But furthermore, you know, sometimes a particular use is suspected to be fraudulent. Maybe it's stolen. You've probably all got that terrible, your credit card is declined. And then you call, they put you on hold. And when they get through to you, they ask you, what's your favorite high school teacher, right? Have you not done that? And then sometimes I just don't remember and my card is locked and I have to go to a local branch. Well, in China, if you are in Ant Financial and you're suspected of possibly fraudulent use, in that case, someone stole your phone, not the credit card, because we don't have credit cards much anymore in China. Then what happens is actually it says, it doesn't actually call you and ask you those quizzes. It says, take a picture of yourself. take a selfie, and then it validates that you are who you say you are, and then your purchase goes through. And if it doesn't look like you, then you have to go through the trouble. So you might ask, what if I hold up a picture of someone, or put on a mask or something? Actually, it's smarter than that. And Financial would say, smile, open your mouth, take a picture of the left profile or the right profile, and then those things would customize so that you can't interactively fool the system. So there's wave 2 and wave 3 combined, completely eliminating the credit card use as well as the credit card fraud check, which actually is a terrible waste to the society, as well as a waste of our time, as well as the jobs that come with it. Okay, we'll get to that later. So in wave 3, also there's speech assistants. In the future, we can anticipate speech assistants that will take what we want to accomplish and get it done, as opposed to the steps to accomplish it. So I could tell my assistant, my wife's birthday is coming up, and it knows what to do. You don't actually have to click open Amazon, look at the flowers and 1-800-Flowers and buy a cake and get a ring and do all that stuff. The assistant knows what to do, just like a really, really smart super assistant, right? So we can anticipate that kind of speech assistant to be possible. Furthermore, we can imagine, and you have seen in Black Mirror, what happens when everything happens around you is recorded. That technology is right around the corner. Now, there are a lot of laws that may prevent that, but imagine technologically, I could carry something that records everything I see and hear, and anytime I want to retrieve it, I just ask the question. So, if I want to say, Michael says, I disagree with your numbers in your book. I said, well, Michael, last year you agreed with them. He says, I didn't. Assistant, play back Michael Chui's message from last year. It would do that. Of course, there are a lot of privacy concerns, but the technologies are basically ready. The amount of storage and the technology it takes to access, and you can see how dramatically our lives will change. Now, there are privacy issues. You may have to implement it differently. You may only record your voice or something, but nevertheless, we'll be extended with infinite memory with everything we saw and heard. So that's kind of wave 3. And then in wave 4, with autonomous AI, the AI will have arms, legs, fingers. It can move and pick up and manipulate. And what can it do then? Well, within robotics, it can become the assembly worker and make things. It will inspect things and make things, and then commercially, you can have robots that will pick fruits for agricultural robotics, or robotics that will wash dishes. How many of you would like a robotic dishwasher? Do you know what that is? That is not your dishwasher today. You basically throw everything from your dinner table just into it, and comes out nicely stacked, clean. Are all the plates and bowls and chopsticks and forks, and all the refuse is classified in recycle bins. You would want that, wouldn't you? So we're invested in a company that is building exactly that, and next year you'll be able to buy this for $300,000. So is that ridiculous? Actually, it's not. All technologies must begin at the very high end for people who can afford it. And then through volume production, costs will come down. So who can afford it? Imagine a fancy restaurant. Let's say the French Laundry. They're probably too small. Imagine a larger French Laundry that employs 5 dishwashers, right? $300,000. 5 dishwashers, amortized over a year and a half, that probably is about the right amount. If the dishwasher were reliable, you pay for it in a year and a half, it pays for itself. And then more of those very high-end restaurants will buy them. The cost will come down. Eventually, maybe in 8 or 10 years, you can buy it for $1,000. So that is the trend. It's going to be from manufacturing to commercial, eventually to the home, with robotics that can manipulate and move. Of course, the biggest application is the autonomous driving. There's some debates as to whether it's going to take 5 or 20 years. I'm sorry, it's such a wide range, but it's somewhere in between, when autonomous vehicles can, in San Francisco, take you from any valid address to another. That's probably the range in which it will take for this to work. But when it works, it's going to be magical. It's not a button in your Tesla. This is going to replace the entire transportation that we're used to today. You will no longer buy cars. I see many famous investors here. Your worst investment, Jack, probably was your car. Well, maybe you have a yacht, but if you don't have a yacht, it's probably your car. Because your car is parked 96% of the time. So it's depreciating. How bad is that for an investment, right? Only 4% of the time is it getting you from place A to place B. But imagine there is an Uber that gets here in 30 seconds and is very reliable, very clean, and there's no nasty driver because there is no driver, and it's very safe. Would you not buy a car? So that completely changes our personal finances, and also it's healthier because it'll be electrical, it'll be shared. There will be fewer cars on the road, so there'll be no congestion because all those parked cars, all the parking garages can be turned into something else, and we'll have more money to spend. It'll be a lot safer. One thing about AI is it gets better with data. So the initial launch of the first L4 product may be slightly better than human in safety. But in a few iterations, a few years, it'll be a lot better than people. In 10 years after its first launch, it'll probably be so much better than people, most of us will be afraid to drive. You know why? Because autonomous vehicles will start talking to each other. They will miss each other by 1 centimeter. And we as humans will become our worst enemies because we're going to be the threat to our lives. The machines are going to be safe. And pretty soon after that, humans will be disallowed from driving. Just like we can't ride horses into highways, right? For those of you who love to drive, just like there's still farms for riding horses, there will be something that allows you to keep driving your car, but not public roads. This may be 30, 35, 40 years away, but it's not, infinity. We can predict the day that will come. And when we have that kind of an amazing autonomous driving, it may also solve a lot of problems in robotics, because think about what you need to solve in driving. You need to see, you need to hear, you need to move. Once you can do all that on the public road, you can surely do it in a home, in a factory, and in a store. So that's the fourth wave. So I don't have time to go into a lot more details, but I think you've already seen this is not just one revolution, it's 4. And this is not just 4 revolutions, there probably will be 50. Why would there be 50? Go back in time to the mid-1990s. And if you were to ask me then, how many waves of the internet revolution would there be? I would not be able to tell you that it would be the browser, websites, portal, search engine, ads, games, e-commerce, O2O, and mobile, right? That's at least like nine revolutions. So the AI will be the same. It's just that in 23 years ago, I wouldn't be able to tell you the exact 9 waves of the internet. I can't tell you the next 9 waves, but these 4 seem pretty certain. Each one will bring about something like 5 to 10% increment to our GDP, and it may displace something like 5 to 10% of our workforce. Just think about the truck drivers and the taxi drivers and the Uber drivers in wave 4. That alone has got to be close to 5% of our population. This won't happen overnight, but it will be over the next 15 or so years. So AI is not a panacea. AI only works under the following 5 conditions: a massive amount of data that's pretty well labeled or tagged, and also in a single domain. And I repeat that again, and that's what protects us. And that it requires a lot of computation, and it requires some AI expertise, less and less as AI becomes easier to use. So back to the question of US and China, US clearly leads in the world in AI research. These are the top, most famous, best researchers, and there are no Chinese among them. And if I show you the top 1,000 AI researchers, you'll find US accounts for about 600 of them. China has maybe 60. So the gap is huge. And also, we all know that Silicon Valley has been the center of all technical revolutions. Everything has been, so far seems to have been driven by the single engine of innovation from Silicon Valley, and the whole world revolved around it. But I'm here to tell you that some things have changed in the last 10 years. China, because of its gigantic market size, has drawn huge amounts of investments that has led to a number of very smart VCs helping very tenacious entrepreneurs build great companies that have a multiplicity of products that attracts yet more people into the market. And all that reinforced by a very strong techno-utilitarian policy by the Chinese government. And that has led to China's rise. And today, there are actually two parallel universes. And this is a very strong theme in the book. I don't have time to explain in detail, so I'll just try to summarize and give one example. What I'm saying here is, I think in Silicon Valley or San Francisco here, most people think that the Steve Jobs model of creating the iPhone is what is the best form and the most admirable form and the most profitable form of innovation. But what China has done in the past 10 years is demonstrating there is a completely different way to build an amazing company that makes great amount of money and has products that seem innovative to you. But never in a moment in the history of the company was there a light bulb going off like the iPhone did for Steve Jobs. That may seem incredible to you. I'll give you the quick example. You all know Yelp, great company. We all use it and love it, $4 billion company. The Yelp of China, Dianping, later merged as Meituan Dianping, ended up with started with a similar concept, but ended up with something very different. It wasn't a light bulb that says, let's give people reviews so they can eat what they want to eat. It was with a phenomenal hunger and ambition that said, we're going to change the way Chinese people eat. And how will we do that? We will deliver food to them in a way that they will no longer want to cook and no longer want to go to restaurants. That seems impossible, but that is what Wang Xing set out to do. And what does it take to deliver that? Well, 600,000 people riding electrical mopeds managed by AI algorithms with the reverse surge pricing, encouraging them to ride more or ride less based on the need in the marketplace, and also a way to manage this 600,000 people, and also not only a fancy delivery algorithm that minimizes the amount of money, but also changing batteries, because in order to get to the desired goal of delivering food hot to your home in 30 minutes, including cooking time, for 70 cents. That's what it's going to take, because users in China aren't going to pay more than 70 cents, because the order of the food is maybe $4. 70 cents is the most they will pay. Otherwise, you're going to basically subsidize. So in order to get the 70 cents, what did he have to do? Not only did he have to write all the fancy AI algorithms, he has to find who will take this little pay. And he's got to go find those 600,000 workers. And these are not your high-end Foxconn employees. They're not your high-end DD drivers. These are people who are a lot less trained, a lot less educated, a lot less skilled. But he's got to undertake the task of finding them, training them, ensuring that these people are courteous and protect his brand. Think how hard that is. And also turnover will be phenomenal. He's got to replace them, because once you train them to be courteous, they're going to get poached by various other companies, right? And think how ugly, and not ugly, but just how difficult that task is. What Silicon Valley entrepreneur would do that? And think about what he has to do about electrical mopeds, because these are cheap mopeds. Their battery only lasts two and a half hours. So he's got to build battery replacement station, not recharging, because you can't wait. Time is money. He has to do all those things to get the cost down to 70 cents per delivery. What if he failed? If it's $1.70, what happens? It was $1.70 for periods of time. Well, 25 million orders a day, $1.70 means you're bleeding $25 million per day. So that's the kind of risk and the gargantuan operational challenge that he decided to overcome. And why did he do it? Because China had a lot of copycats, and still does. And these copycats will will copy your business model. Actually, there is a strong confusion about copycat from IP theft. There is actually a big difference. Copycat is just what Facebook did to Snapchat, right? Nothing illegal. Some people frown upon it, but nothing illegal. And this happens all the time in China. That's why a lot of people say Facebook is the most Chinese company. I really don't think there's anything dishonorable in what they do, right? I mean, some people can choose to frown on it because of the culture and values, but when copying is the norm, the only way you can build a business to last is to build a business that's uncopyable. So what business is uncopyable? A business that's so expensive and so painful and so operationally complex to replicate. And that is what Wang Xing did for Meituan. And what's his reward? A $55 billion market capitalization when he went public in Hong Kong, about 14 times that of Yelp. So that gives you an example. There are so many other examples in the book. I can't go into a lot of details, but suffice it to say that it's a tough environment that forces tenacious entrepreneurs to build uncopyable products. Seems like an impossible proposition, but that is what is happening in China. So as a result of such competition, China has very quickly graduated from kindergarten on the left side, copycats from the US. Companies there could be called Google of China, eBay of China, Amazon of China, Yahoo of China, to the elementary school in the green, which is basically inspired by the US, but developed and became better. For example, WeChat is a better product than WhatsApp. Weibo is a better product than Twitter. Our investment Zhihu is a better product than Quora. If you're bilingual, try them and you will see. So that is a great sign that the Chinese entrepreneurs have matured, that they can develop decent products based on user needs. Then they went to college, which is the orange line. They started building their own. And the products there, I'm not even going to explain. Those of you who know them, know them. Those of you who don't, there is no US equivalent. So I cannot explain any of them in less than 5 minutes. So I can't explain it. Take my word that the orange column is valued at, I think, about $400 billion. And they're all Chinese innovations. And many of them on the final right-hand side, going to PhD, is getting copied, not to China, but from China. So that's what has happened. And also, in building these companies, the Chinese entrepreneurs really have this gladiator-like fighting tenacity and capability. And going back to the Meituan story, if you think the game is over, he's won. He has control with this 600,000 delivery and owning the Chinese business, well, that would be wrong. I have no doubt that Alibaba will throw $10 billion to challenge that hegemony. Whether who succeeds or not, I don't know, but the Colosseum is an ever-expanding Colosseum that it does not end until it covers the whole universe. And with that spirit and incredible hardworking Chinese entrepreneurs is what a core part of what's going to make China lead in AI. So you're probably wondering why I went through all this entrepreneurship, because it relates to AI. Because these entrepreneurs now can get all this funding. In terms of total AI funding, CB Insights shows the Chinese AI funding has eclipsed the US AI funding. The Chinese stock market loves Chinese companies, so the equivalent companies are valued higher in China than they are in the US. And the Chinese company valuations have gone up substantially. And just to show you, just Sinovation Ventures alone, and our AI portfolio alone, we have invested in 14 unicorns total, 5 of which are AI companies. And these are core, true, real AI companies. These are not, Meitu uses AI, so I'll tell you it's an AI company. These are absolutely 100% AI companies, and they have a total valuation of $21 billion. And that is the state that is pushing the Chinese AI forward. And the very important point is that AI has shifted from the era of early adopter research-oriented work, which clearly US would lead given the 10-to-1 ratio in researchers, to a stage where AI is ready for widespread adoption. Who would lead the widespread adoption? You'll want actually a triangle leadership with a very strong salesperson, because AI is about B2B sales, and a very strong solution/product person, and then, of course, still need an AI-grade CTO engineer. But you no longer need that inventor of deep learning or the disciple of the inventor of deep learning. And at that level of capability, the right-hand side, the widespread adoption, China has so many of those leaders. Any one of the examples in my book, the founders of any one of the billion-dollar companies can be that CEO. The salespeople trained by Microsoft, SAP, IBM can be that CEO. So because we've shifted from the era of discovery to the era of implementation, we're now in a stage where it's gone from advantage US to advantage China. And data, this is actually the most important part. The right-hand picture is a generic picture that shows you 4 researchers, 4 algorithms. Doesn't matter what they are, who they are, what they do. When you have more data, they just work better. The x-axis shows you more data. The y-axis shows you better performance. So you can see having a better scientist helps, but having more data helps you even more. Because deep learning is actually a slightly still brittle system that overcomes its lack of our brain conceptual thinking by seeing so many samples that it can do better predictions. So we can conceptualize pretty well based on 3 examples. Deep learning may need 10 million, but by seeing 10 million, it finds correlations and patterns that we don't know. So the more data, the better, because it doesn't have our conceptual thinking. So what this means is that in the age of AI, if data is the new oil, then China is the new Saudi Arabia. And this shows you how much data China has. Upper left-hand side shows you the breadth of data. China has more people, 3 times, 4 times more than US or India. But the other 3 shows you the depth of data. Each Chinese user would have more data in food delivery, mobile internet, shared bicycle rides. You might be saying, no, Kai-Fu, what does shared bicycle rides have to do with AI? It absolutely does, because if you ride Mobike, it has 6 sensors transmitting all kinds of data up to the cloud and using it to do all kinds of smart interpretations, decisions about who you as a user like based on where you went and where the bicycle state is and whether it should be moved and all kinds of information to help it monetize better. So actually the Mobike is one of the first IoT ecosystems built with 20 terabytes of data transmitted to the cloud every day. We know that because we're investors in Mobike. So, and food delivery knows what you ate, knows what restaurants deliver to you, of course, the mobile payment, which is the most incredible. For those of you who haven't been to China for the 3 years, please be careful when you go because your credit card and cash may not be accepted. If you go to a fancy big city, maybe you're still okay, but China has pretty much been taken over by mobile payment, by WeChat and Alibaba. This is a picture of buying a watermelon. My wife told me that's not a good picture because she saw a beggar holding up a big sign saying, "Scam me," right? And there are also people who rob convenience stores. 3 convenience stores and they got only $100 worth because there's no one has cash. So what does that mean realistically? I think realistically, clearly for AI, this means there's this golden mountain of data that can be mined by the Tencent, Alibaba, as well as by the app owner, as well as by the store people who own the stores. But it also means it's a great boon for entrepreneurialism because you don't have to accumulate 50 million users. You can monetize them immediately. And actually, by the way, I think America had better do something to get rid of those credit cards because that extra 2 to 3% tax is not something small, medium businesses ought to be paying anymore. And China has demonstrated that it can work without that friction. These mobile payment systems charge less than 0.1% of the transaction fee, basically imposed by the bank as a transaction fee. So the final advantage for China is the techno-utilitarian policy. Generally, what does that mean? It means Chinese government is willing to let a policy go without fully understanding its ramifications, knowing that the government can regulate it later should issues be demonstrated and proven. So imagine what we were just talking about, mobile payments. For when first Tencent and Alibaba launched their forms of mobile payments, probably there were banks and and credit card companies complaining to the government, oh, software companies can't deal with financials, this is dangerous, they'll mess it up, trillions of dollars will be lost. But the Chinese government probably said, no, we're going to let them give it a shot. If issues occur, we'll then regulate them. And then, as a matter of fact, Tencent and Alibaba proved their worth so that now they've completely squeezed credit cards as well as banks out of the business of payment. Of course, the Chinese government isn't unwilling to regulate, for example, cryptocurrency. When that caused a lot of money laundering and other issues, that was outlawed. So the approach is not to deliberate it fully, let it go out, see how it goes, regulate as needed. That's the techno-utilitarian approach. Another important thing is setting the tone. On the left side, you saw an important paper on AI development plan by the State Council in July 2017. I heard you're having one on manufacturing 2025. There are similar types of papers. Unlike most of what Western media reports, these papers are not giving money to Chinese companies. They kind of set a tone and give the choice to the individual companies and local governments to decide what they want to do. So we saw as a beneficiary of this State Council plan as follows. Our investment in Fourth Paradigm, one of the unicorns, was selling AI to banks. And they were having trouble with some banks. But when this policy came out, the banks said, come talk to us again. Because, well, the central government said it's important before we kind of ruled it out because of not invented here or whatever reason. Well, since it's important to the central government, let us at least have a listen. And then we ended up selling more software, not because the government gave the money, but because setting the tone. The third part is about infrastructure building, about autonomous vehicles. Well, what can the government do to facilitate the adoption of autonomous vehicles? The city of Xiong'an, the size of is being built as the size of Chicago with autonomous vehicle as a forethought. The city of Suzhou is building a 2-layer part of the city, 10 square kilometers, 1 layer autonomous, 1 layer human driving. Xiong'an also has 2 layers, is in the downtown, top layer for pedestrians, pets, and bicycles, bottom layer for vehicles, human and autonomous. Which way is right? We don't know. However, it's a little bit like entrepreneurship. Central government sets the tone, local government do what they think is the best. Some local governments are saying, well, we have great universities like Nanjing, let's start an AI park. Other cities like Chongqing may be saying, we have great manufacturing, let's invite AI for manufacturing. So they all get to tailor according to what they see fit. And of course, some cities may be too poor, and they say, well, AI plan is great, but I better focus on fixing poverty. So this is not a centrally coordinated, this is a central tone adopted individually. But nevertheless, the huge amounts of money is spent, but not on subsidizing companies that the government chooses, but rather building infrastructure that private enterprise cannot do. It's more comparable to President Eisenhower's building of the interstate highways. So a lot of the media and some public official in the US accusing China of subsidizing, at least in the case of autonomous vehicle and AI, I would say that was not true. So where are we? I hate to make things zero-sum because they're not, but everyone has to know, so I give my odds. I think China today is catching up in implementation, and then will catch up and lead probably in 5 years, by a little. And where will China not lead? Probably in business AI, largely because even banks, insurance companies, and hospitals, they don't have proper data warehousing to store all the records. Without good structured data storage, it's hard to do AI. But let me also say that AI is absolutely not a zero-sum game. Chinese government wants Chinese people to live better. American government wants American people to live better. Chinese capitalists fund the Chinese companies who build products for Chinese users. American VCs fund the American companies who build products for American companies. Where is the zero-sum game? There is not an energy or a land grab that one has to own. One country doing better does not mean the other country does less. So I just want to clarify, this chart is not in any way intended to show a zero-sum competition, especially given the parallel universes that the two countries have developed. And all these forces will lead to a faster adoption of AI. I've spent the last 20 minutes explaining the upper left. That is, unlike the previous technical revolutions, this one has the dual engine. It has US and China working together. So there might be more progress than the days of the internet or days of the PC. The seven giants are training people and bringing lots of data together. And these people are leaving at times to start new companies. And VCs and funds, SoftBank has $100 billion already invested in the first fund. And the AI platforms are emerging for more people to jump on with less training and building more applications. So PwC, oops, should have updated with McKinsey, shouldn't I? PwC and McKinsey estimates on the range of $11 to $16 trillion of net increase to the global GDP by the year 2030. And that is the kind of wealth that will come about. And I actually think there might be further upside if those four factors really start to take in. But then finally, I want to cover an important area that is also in the book, which is that AI will also cause unprecedented challenges and disruptions. In the US, you've probably heard more about privacy, security, bias from data, from monopolies, from wealth inequality. But I also want to highlight something about job displacement. Because as you've heard, if AI can within a single domain do superhuman job, then many jobs will be challenged because while your jobs are complex jobs that probably aren't endangered by AI, if you think globally about all the jobs, how many of them are scripts of repetitions of the same routine task being done over and over again? And if they are, then they're subject to being displaced by AI. So if you kind of put all the jobs on a scale of very repetitive jobs to very creative jobs, I would say that in the next 5, 10, 15 years, AI will be able to do many of the jobs on the left side, leaving some of us escaping from the AI displacement. And this is happening today on both blue collar and white collar. On the left side, you see Wall Street Journal talking about robotic hamburger flippers. On the lower center, you see a little machine. That's one we funded. It is funded and being used in a pastry shop called 原麦山丘 in Beijing. There are 100 stores. Right now, they're in 2. In a couple of months, they'll be in all 100, and they will completely displace the cashiers. And this is not one of those scanning things that you have in Walgreens or what? Where do you have those? Safeway? Yeah, Safeway. No, it's not one of those. You just take a whole tray of pastries and put it under the computer vision algorithm, and within 1 second, it charges your WeChat, and then you're done. So, you've seen Amazon Go, but you probably didn't know Amazon Go costs like $10 million to build. This single cashier machine is $800. It's a one-time cost. So the cashier jobs, the hamburger flipping jobs, they will be gone. And they're not just going to be gone by one-to-one displacement. They'll be gone by industry disruption. On the lower left-hand side, you see a F5 Future Store, another one of our investments. It's basically a robotic fast food. So when you go in, it scans your face, and then you pick what you want to eat, such as beef noodle, fishball soup, salad, etc. And it's all made in the robot. The robot is that obscure part of the store you see here. So that is a giant machine that makes all the food. It has a steamer, a fryer, microwave, everything in there. And then little packets of things are being shoved around, and they're put in a noodle. They taste quite good. If you ever go to Guangzhou, under Xiaomanyao, there is a store. Now, there are actually 100 other stores, but that's the easiest one to find. It tastes very good. A bowl of beef noodles is $1.50. So that will give McDonald's a run for its money. right? Imagine stores like that taking 50% market share in China in the next 10 years. Not at all inconceivable. That means McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken will have to lay off half of their workforce. So it's not as though it's through direct displacement, but also through industry disruptions. On the right-hand side, on the top, you see Citi give a warning that 20,000 of its operational staff in the next 3 years will be, half of them will be replaced, and AI and automation will be put in place for white-collar work, fairly high-end white-collar work. On the bottom is an example of a company called Toutiao. Think of them as, I hate to describe it this way, but that's what they are, as a Facebook newsfeed on steroids. So Facebook newsfeed that even entices you further to be totally addicted to clicking on more. Okay, and here I am not advocating that is a good form of journalism, but it is attracting 72 minutes per user to be used on it per day. So if you can, it's probably not hard to imagine in the future, half of humans' time spent on news is spent on such robotically edited content. While we all know no self-respecting media will ever replace a good editor with a robot, it is happening nevertheless, because if half the eyeballs leave traditional media and news websites and go to these robotically created content, half the editor's jobs must be gone. So I'm not here commenting on the merits of traditional media, which I admire and respect, but the reality is these disruptions will happen, white collar and blue collar, one-on-one, as well as through disruptions. So what happens when all these people who might be out of work, here I won't speculate how many, you can put your favorite number, but a large number of them, can they all become CEOs and scientists? Of course not. So what other dimensions are left? Well, what AI cannot do are really two classes of things. On the left are AI are tools, they cannot create. But on the right, AI has no love, compassion, empathy. AI cannot do the human-to-human touch jobs. So I would advocate that when we think about the jobs, they're not just one dimension, at least there are two dimensions. In fact, there are many dimensions, but here we're going to show probably the two most prominent dimensions, from low creativity to high creativity, and then the x-axis from lower empathy to higher empathy required. And it's hard to put a word on it, but I use compassion, but it's really a combination of trust, compassion, empathy, human to human. Makes you feel good. You want a human, you don't want a robot. And how many jobs are like that? Actually, there are quite many. I give some examples here. Take as one example, elderly care. That is a job for which there are 1 million openings in America, very hard to fill. Why? Because they're not well paid. But they're going to be very much needed because we're living longer, and people over 80 need 5 times as much care as people between 60 to 80. So there's a need for such workers. There's a need for more nurses and nannies. People will have more free time, so there's more a need for tour guides and concierges and the 3 Michelin restaurants. And also, think about a job as a doctor. A doctor, one would argue, it's very likely in 30 years, a doctor's analytical, diagnostic, and prescription capabilities are better done by an AI. Maybe sooner, but let's say 30 years. But if that happens, it doesn't mean the human part is eliminated, because when we're ill, we're very vulnerable. We want a doctor to comfort us, to listen to us vent. We need a doctor to tease out our family history and details to feed into the AI engine. We want the doctor to care about us, give us more time, visit us at home. We want doctors that will cover people of all income and cover people who are from poorer regions and countries. So there should be an opportunity for there to be 10 times more doctors. The same can be said for teachers. Also, we can potentially have teachers whose repetitive jobs can be done by AI and robot, such as grading homework, giving the same lecture over and over again, answering basic questions about simple things, giving quizzes and drills, grading homeworks and exams. We, in fact, have funded companies to do that, so as to uplift the job of a teacher to be that of a mentor, to be more one-on-one. And just a little bit plug, this Sunday or next Sunday, you will see me on 60 Minutes talking about our AI on education. And it's actually more philanthropic than it is an investment. But this is something I believe in, and it's an honor to be able to integrate our beliefs with investments that can have upside. So if you start to believe there can be 10 times more teachers, they're more one-on-one, then why can't parents choose to be teachers? And why can't governments subsidize the pay of someone who chooses to take 12 years off work to be one-on-one homeschooling teacher? So I think these are ideas that can help with the job transition, because the bottom left of the jobs will over time disappear. And I'm making an argument here that the people in the bottom left of the job cannot transition to just be CEOs and scientists and columnists, but they can perhaps very likely go for the jobs on the upper left, especially if there are some subsidies by government or corporate responsibility or philanthropy that will increase the job and therefore increase the pay and therefore the respect of elderly caretaker, homeschool teachers, and so on. So this is the blueprint of the future of how people and AI can coexist. On the bottom left are jobs that will eventually be all taken by AI. On the bottom right are AI tools that will make our scientists and drug discovering scientists even more creative and come up with more life-saving drugs. On the upper left will be AI analytical engines, but wrapped with human warmth and perhaps a lot of new job opportunities. And on the upper right are the human plus AI, but primarily human with the shining capability of compassion and creativity. So that is the blueprint, and it's not a simple picture of AI-human symbiosis, which some people like to hand-wave and have us believe. It's also not a simple picture of job displacement, which is a dystopia that is worse than the actual reality. So a lot of things can be done, and AI is really more like electricity. The people who work in AI, myself and my colleagues, they're all sharing. Despite all this US-China trade issues, when you go to an academic conference, you will see half Chinese, half Americans really intermingling, sharing ideas, sharing data, sharing papers, publishing in real time on the archiving website on the upper left, and sharing source code on GitHub. So that kind of sharing is going on, and I like to think the sharing shouldn't stop at the academic community. It can also be in the idea community, whether it's ideas like UBI, ideas like jobs of compassion, ideas like encouraging gifted education. I think collectively we have the wisdom to overcome the problems that I presented. So for the past 45 minutes, I've talked about the next 20 years. The opportunities and challenges. But I want to close by saying if we look 50 years in the future, when we look back, when we don't have that burden of work equals meaning of life, what might we think in 50 years? I think we will think of two things. First, I think we will recognize that AI is actually serendipity, because it takes away the routine job that was never meant for us to do. And it forces us into thinking what it is that excites us, that we're passionate about, and makes us human. I would imagine our maker is probably very disappointed at us, that after thousands of years of evolution, we're still here like little rodents running in a wheel, spinning on the wheel, doing the same thing over and over again, thinking that's the meaning of our lives. And I'm thinking that maker perhaps got so sick and tired of it, he decided to give AI to us. And that by finally taking all the jobs away, we have no choice but to think about what it is that makes us human. And finally, the last thing that I think we'll realize is that as much as AI may sound dangerous and threatening, AI is actually just a tool. We are the humans, and we're the ones who have free choice, and we're the ones who are going to write the ending to the story of us and AI. Thank you.
We do have time for just a couple questions, and then Kai-Fu needs to take off. So go ahead, and the glasses right there, straight ahead.
Hi, my name is David. I have a question about your assumption that AI can only limit itself in one domain today.
Now, I think of potential applications of AI, such as China's social credit system, that can source data from stuff like facial recognition, your credit scores, and many other so-called domains or areas of data, and combine them into one huge black box to allow government to make decisions. I'm just wondering if one day we will be able to break that one domain assumption at all.
Well, let's pick a different application because I don't know that one very well. I know it's covered a lot in the media, but actually no one I know in China knows what that is. So let's pick an application like loans, okay? In a loan application, it actually takes 3,000 parameters from your life that we've implemented and funded. They take all kinds of things, such as what apps do you have installed, how long did it take to fill in the address, how much money do you have, how much battery is on your phone, takes all kinds of information and just feeds it to a giant network that determines whether to give you the loan or not. And it has an estimate of your likelihood of default, okay? So you could argue that's a multi-dimensional data input, but it's still one task. The task is to give you the loan or not. So hypothetically, if we were going to have applications that determine, let's take another, if you like government examples, I'll give you a real government example. There is a city in China that is adopting what's called a sentencing assistance, that is taking a lot of data from the case and giving to the judge a suggestion of the range of sentencing that might be appropriate and fair for this particular case. Obviously, the judge makes the final decision, but you could argue it's looking so much at the person's criminal records, the cases, the evidence, the types of possible crimes that have been committed, and the feedback from the questioning of the police and so on and so forth, the overwhelming evidence or not. And that's a lot of data coming in. But at the end, it is making just one estimate. What is the right range of sentencing? So AI still hasn't got out of this mode where you can have a very complex amount of data going in, but ultimately you're making that one decision within one domain. So that's what I mean by one domain. It doesn't mean the data is one domain. The data can be incredibly complex. In fact, the more complex, the better. Deep learning can learn to ignore data that doesn't matter. So if your battery life doesn't affect your trustworthiness, it will ignore that. And if it does, it will use it. And the great thing is we humans don't have to decide. We just throw it all in. It'll use whatever it thinks makes sense. So it's not the data that's not single domain. It's the decision that's single domain.
Thank you.
The woman in the red. And while the mic's going over there, these books are sold out on Amazon. Oh, JJ. Oh,
They'll be restocked on October 2nd.
Yeah, they're sold out, so grab them outside.
Thank you. Over here. So I'm wondering, in the biotech vertical, what do you think are the best ways that China and the US will collaborate going forward, and what is already being done now?
So you mean like drug discovery and
medical devices, healthcare, robotics?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think given the current political environment, healthcare and education are the two areas with the greatest promise of collaboration, and I think that's worthy of pursuit in general. The areas that we as Innovation Ventures feel are promising is drug discovery, and in particular, repurposing of drugs, because those are much easier. See, if you open it up to invent a new drug, it's too hard for AI. If you focus it on repurposing of already pre-invented, not only do you accelerate adoption and profitability, but also you're making the AI problem simpler. We like that a lot. We certainly think healthcare, within healthcare, cancer diagnosis, and also the use of DNA sequencing, because DNA sequencing is the data that is so vast in the amount of data you have that it overwhelms humans from using it. So there's an opportunity to train models that are personalized. So it's kind of basically individually targeted medicine. Whereas, when you talk about individually targeted Facebook newsfeed, you get shivers, but individually targeted treatment, that's great stuff, right?
Do you have time for one more?
Sure.
Okay, Ahmad.
Sorry, what was that?
right up in front here.
By the
And
way,
while
if you
we're waiting
didn't
for the-
see, you can have the slides. Actually, I think I have a longer slides that I can send to you if you would do this. Yeah.
And afterwards, there will be a reception outside, so please join us for some food and wine. Last question.
Thank you. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. I have two questions. Feel free to answer one or neither one. But what do you think is going to happen to morality with AI?
To what?
To morality.
Morality.
For example, you mentioned sentencing. What about sentencing before a crime happens based on data? That's the first question. The second question is what happens to outliers? Because when we look at large data, by definition, we're eliminating people or cases that are not part of that sometimes they have created big changes throughout the history. If everything is centric based on the data that we have, based on what has happened, what's going to happen to those cases?
Okay. I'll quickly answer both questions. As far as outliers, think of these AI algorithms not as in memorizing the 10 million data they looked at, but as opposed to drawing distributions. So, for example, let's just think two-dimensionally. If we have two dimensions and we found that these are the people who default on loans, these are people who don't, then we kind of draw a curve like that and separate them. And what happens is if you have an outlier that's really strange, nobody's like it, but he or she is here, it's still within that mathematical curve. So it is able to deal with outliers as long as they're consistent with the general way the parameters work out. On the morality part, I think that is a huge issue. I knew that sentencing assistance would cause some of you to have shivers. And on the one hand, you can see the intellectual argument, right? One person would say, it's just a tool, the judge decide. But the other person would say, well, when the tool becomes really accurate, the judge will have a lot of burden to not follow the tool because then he or she will pay the price and that will be recorded. So that is a tough question. I'm not an expert in the area. I would say that maybe I'll answer a slightly easier question about bias. That's something that people ask a lot. What about bias in this judge sentencing assistance? Might there not be bias if you're trained on a gender, racial, disproportionate data? Well, I would say, I think the fairest we can do is to make sure the input data is balanced, and that I would also say that humans are a lot more biased than we might think. AI is probably not more biased than humans because an example is Israeli judges were measured and they gave a lot tougher sentences right before lunch. When they were hungry, they're biased. So I think we people are quite biased, and I actually personally think AI can be less biased if we're careful about treating the data. But this doesn't really answer your question about morality, because I think our concern isn't whether it's fair or biased. It's about whether it is correct to let a machine decide on our fate, on our freedom, on our life, and on our health. And I wish I could answer the question, but I'm glad you asked it. I hope we all think about it and help our governments figure out the answer. Thank you.
Kai-Fu Lee, come back soon. Thank you so much.